Hello and welcome to the second lecture in a series of 6 lectures on William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. And today we'll actually turn to the play. I'd like to look at Act 1. I'm thinking though that I'm going to have to divide this lecture into 2 parts. Let's call them Part A and Part B. Looking over the material, there's simply so much to cover. And although I like to hear myself talk, after a couple of hours even I begin to bore myself. So let's see what we can accomplish today. Let's talk first about your midterm essay. Remember, we're focusing on option A, and you are to write an analytical essay. So first, I guess we better make sure we understand clearly what an analysis is. So when we analyze something, we ask ourselves, let's say we're analyzing, let's call it an X. We're analyzing X, and we're asking ourselves, what is the purpose of X? What's its purpose? What's its function? And let me give you an example. Let's take, I thought of a car. So let's call X equals a car. So let's ask, we're going to analyze a car. What does that mean? We're going to analyze what is the purpose of a car? What is a car's function? And to do that, we take the car, which is, think of it as a whole entity, a car, and we divide it into parts. We look at its pieces, its various, we look at, for example, the carburetor. We look at the fan belt. We consider the brake system. We look at the radiator and the engine. And what we're trying to do is see what these parts are doing, how they're interacting with each other, how they're functioning, and what it is their goal, their objective is ultimately. What is the purpose of all of these elements of the car? And we discover that all of these elements come together, and the purpose is to have a vehicle for transportation. That's how we analyze a car. So for our purposes, we're going to be analyzing, what are we analyzing? What is our X? We're going to be looking at love in the play A Midsummer Night's Dream. We're going to be asking, what is the purpose? Why is this a topic in the play? What is the purpose of this topic in the play? What's its function? What's it doing in the play? And so what we're going to do is look at the play and divide it into its parts, into its various elements, and we're going to see how each of those parts interact with each other to reveal the purpose of this topic being in the play, this topic of love. So we look at, for example, the setting of the play, and we look at the plot of the play. We consider the characters in the play. We're going to focus on the language also in the play. And all of these parts come together and they will reveal what love is, just what is it doing in this play? What is how do we interpret, how is love being presented? What is the play saying about love? And I'm going to argue, if you recall, that the play is saying that love has a dark side, a disturbing side, a very realistic and tragic side, contrary to what most people think. Most people remember are romantics or comic optimists when it comes to the emotion known as love. But I'm going to say that that's what this play is doing, A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's looking at love, that's the topic, and it's offering an opinion on that topic, one that we can interpret if we look at all of these various elements, all of these ingredients in the pie. If we taste all of these ingredients, we see this pie don't taste too good. Love is something disconcerting, it's upsetting, it's worrisome. It's not at all what we imagine it to be. It really is, in the play, it's being, the realistic side of love is being depicted. The tragic elements in the game of love are being shown to us. They're being described to us. And I guess we could start, just to give you an example of how we go about analyzing, let's start with the title. We could start with the title, A Midsummer Night's Dream. And when you think of that title, well, Midsummer, you can start with that word. When you think of Midsummer, Midsummer Day, for example, is the longest day in the year. And summer is, conventionally speaking, summer is associated with youth. It's the time of life when you are at the height of your powers, your strength, your beauty, your potential. And also, it's the time when young people first become sexually awakened, when they're first become interested in love. So, midsummer, summer, think of summer as that season that's symbolic of youth and of love and of course, sexual desire. And then we think of the word night. Again, think of in terms of what we're writing on, love here. Well, night, of course, is the time that we associate, generally speaking again, we associate nighttime with the time for love, for romance. We imagine, right, the night is the time that lovers come together. We think of, for example, the moon is often symbolic of love, or we think of a starry sky. And so night is the time when lovers meet, when they have their rendezvous, when they come together and experience each other's, experience each other's desire and fulfill their desires for one another. And then finally we have the word dream. Again, if you think about it, we often use that word, don't we? When we talk about love. Love is like a dream, or we use the term a dream lover. I always remember this song from years ago called Mr. Sandman, Send Me a Dream. So the idea of love, looking for that dream lover, the dream girl or the dream boy, someone where, our ideal image of the person we desire, the person we want. And so you can think all of these words in the title of the play, they're revealing that what this play is about ultimately, that the primary topic, the chief topic that this play is going to treat, is going to be concerned with, is love. And then we could go back to those terms and rethink them a little bit too, because remember, I'm presenting love here in a positive and an optimistic way when I interpret the title, but I could go back through that title and say, well, yes, Midsummer Day, the longest day of the year, representing the height of one's strength and power and beauty and desire, sexual desire. But with sexual desire and with that passionate desire comes aggression and violence, and people can behave, particularly young people, but all people really, actually, people can, under the influence of desire and passion, the animal can get loose, can't it? And people can begin to misbehave. They can begin to act irrationally. And their irrational behavior, their aggressive, perhaps even violent behavior can lead to all kinds of harm. And in addition, if you look at the next word, night again, conventionally speaking, can represent confusion and chaos. It's a time when predators come out and seek their prey. So again, it's this time of misrule where none of the laws of civilization seem to be in operation. We're going to find in the play that the young lovers exit the city of Athens, which represents, of course, civilization, law and order, and they're going to enter the woods, and they're going to do so at nighttime. And so this idea of leaving the world of law and order, the world of civilization, the world of rule, and entering a realm where all is dark and all is chaotic and all is confusion, there's a very disturbing aspect to that idea, because people can, as I said, they can misbehave, when they no longer feel the constraints of living in a civilized a place, they can suddenly act out their desires and do so without hesitation and without concern that what they might be doing could be dangerous, could be harmful, could cause others to suffer. And then finally, if you think of that word dream, again, looking at the word from the realistic angle, from a realistic perspective, we recall that dreams are illusions. And yes, dreams are real, illusions are real, as we said in the introductory lecture, but they aren't an accurate model, are they, of the real world. I notice in my own dreams, for example, all kinds of strange things, bizarre things occur. Perhaps I've often experienced what's called a dream in which I fly. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that as well, but obviously in the real world I can't fly, and yet in the dream world sometimes I actually do fly. So, but it is an illusion, and it's not an accurate depiction of the real world. So this idea that love can be a dream, and there's such a thing as a dream lover out there waiting just for you and just for me, that idea perhaps is an illusion. And perhaps instead what we're going to find, some dreams can turn quite ugly. They can become nightmarish, can't they? Perhaps here in A Midsummer Night's Dream, perhaps a more appropriate way of looking at this play is to think of it as A Midsummer Night's Nightmare. So just looking at the title, look and see what I'm doing here. I'm analyzing the title. I'm looking at the whole title, and I'm breaking it apart into each word. And I'm thinking about each word, and I'm making associations. That's what my brain is doing. It's thinking about summer. And what do I think about when I think about summer? Or what do I think about when I think of Midsummer Day? And then I do the same with the word night and the same with the word dream. And then I'm thinking about this topic, and I'm asking myself, how does this title, what's its purpose or function when it comes to the topic of love? So I've always got to keep in mind, I've always got to make that link between the evidence I'm finding. I've got to find that evidence first and then logically link it back to this idea of love. And that's what I've done. I've tried to do in giving you some ideas to think about the title of the play. So the title of the play does announce this topic in an indirect way, doesn't it? It's going to be a play about love. And it gives us, on the one hand, it gives us a kind of romantic view of love, but on the other, just beneath the surface, there's something else going on in the title itself. There are these disturbing features, these disquieting elements to consider. And that's what I'm going to argue. I'm going to say that on the surface, this play, and particularly when it comes to the topic of love, on the surface, it looks like a romantic comedy. It looks like it's supporting this idea of thinking about love again, the romantic view of love, and the comic plot line when it comes to falling in love. So it looks as if it's supporting this romantic view of love and this comic plot line of love. But I'm saying there's something else going on here, something subtle. And as we progress through the play, we're going to keep seeing again and again throughout the play, we're going to see these little indications, these little hints, these little moments in the play that suddenly disrupt the harmony, disturb, upset, cause problems for the young lovers. And ultimately, we're going to arrive at this conclusion that love in this play is being presented not as something mysterious and magical. It's not being presented as something that's designed that you or I, we have a special soulmate somewhere in the world and we're destined to find one another, and when we do, we'll come together and all will be harmonious and we'll live happily ever after even. And that our lives, that life will ultimately be good, and our lives in particular will ultimately be good, and we'll want to continue on. And, love can lead to marriage and, of course, children. So that is the surface appeal. But this play is doing something else, I'm going to say. It's going to say, no, what's being presented here is a realistic depiction of love. This is a love is love. The lovers are falling in love in a world that's in the real world. And a lot of problems are going to arise for the lovers because of this. And the plot line, on the surface, is going to appear to have a happy ending, but in reality, it's going to take a U-turn and head straight to the tragic conclusion. So that's what we're doing here in the play. We're going to analyze the play. We're going to analyze, specifically, we're going to focus on the topic of love and see what the play, what is love doing in this play? Why is this topic in the play? What is the play saying? What is Shakespeare saying ultimately about this emotion, about this thing called love? So let's take a pause, and I shall return in just a moment. And I have returned. Here I am once more, and I just wanted to mention that, this is option A we're exploring, but there are other topics in the play that you could look at. You could simply say, you could plug in the topic you're interested in. So let's say nature in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and ask yourself, what is the play saying about nature? How is the play functioning? How are all the elements in the play operating to give us an understanding of this topic, nature? What's nature? How is nature being presented in the play? What's the function of the play? What's its purpose in introducing this topic in the play? What does it want us to understand? What does it want us to come with? What new knowledge concerning nature does it want to give us? Or you could plug in the topic if you're interested, if you're not interested in love or in writing about nature, you could plug in the supernatural world. What is the supernatural? That topic, what is it doing in the play? Or you could look, for example, we're going to discuss, not too terribly much, but to some extent, the patriarchal order that we find ourselves in when we enter the world of A Midsummer Night's Dream. So that becomes the topic that you would like to explore. So just to give you some other ideas in case, I'm really interested in your finding a topic that you want to write about. That's all important. So if the topic of love is not something you care to write on, think about other topics. Be on the lookout as you read the play for other topics that might interest you. So when we talk about this topic and how the play interprets, when we're talking about love, that's the topic we're exploring. And what the play is saying, what opinion is the play offering on love, that becomes a theme of the play. That's what we call a theme. Love is the topic, and what the play says about love. Love, I'm arguing, is dark. It's disturbing. It has a disconcerting, realistic side, and ultimately it ends in tragedy. This is the opinion I'm offering. This is what I'm saying. This is what the play, let's imagine, this is what the play is saying. So this becomes the play's theme, the topic of love and what the play is saying about love. Then I take that theme, and that theme becomes my thesis for my essay. So if I've decided to write on love, that's the topic, and then my interpretation, that's the opinion I'm offering. So the topic plus the opinion, my interpretation of that topic, why love is in this play, what's the purpose, how is it functioning, what is the play saying about love, that becomes my thesis. So the theme of the play, the theme of a literary work, if you're writing about that, that becomes the thesis of your essay. And just think of the thesis of your essay as a very simple mathematical formula. When you write out the thesis, you need to include the topic that you're writing about, in this case, love or romantic desire, and then you want to state your opinion. Midsummer Night's Dream presents love as, and then in your own words state how you see the play depicting, how is it describing love, particularly romantic love. We're focused on, I should say that, shouldn't I? Romantic love, love between couples. But it's not just enough, right, to give your opinion. You can't just say, here's my opinion, here's what the play is saying. You're going to have to support that opinion. Unfortunately, in today's world, too many people think that they are entitled to their opinion. And of course, everyone is entitled to his opinion. But what they're not entitled to is they're not entitled to other people's respect for their opinion if they can't support their opinion. So anybody who makes a pronouncement and says, well, I'm entitled to my opinion, yes, of course you're entitled to your opinion, but why should I respect it if you can't support it? You've got to give me some reasons behind your opinion. Otherwise, I don't have to respect it. So everyone is entitled to his or her opinion, but not everyone is entitled to have his opinion respected. Particularly if there can't be reasons put forward for that opinion. So for our thesis, we're going to have to support it. And you support it in what's called an essay map. I'm going to ask you to give 3 reasons to support your opinion. So you need to focus on 3 problems that the lovers confront in the play to illustrate this idea that love does have this side to it that is quite upsetting, quite frightening and disturbing. Now I say 3. Why 3? Well, everybody knows that 3 is the magical number, right? I mean, how many pigs in The Big Bad Wolf and the 3 Little Pigs? 3. How many bears in Goldilocks and the 3 Bears? 3. How many witches in Macbeth? Say 3. 3. So we have this idea of 3 the magical number. But no, in reality, there's no magic to the number 3. The reason I say 3 is because 3 is generally speaking, 3 is enough reasons to make your point, to show that you have a rational argument that's sound. So 3 reasons is just a good round number. It's an adequate amount of support that you're presenting to persuade an audience. But you don't have to offer 3 reasons. You could offer simply 1 reason. So you could look at one problem in the play that the lovers confront that's especially, in your opinion, disturbing, and you could analyze that one problem in greater depth. Remember, your essay needs to be 1,500 words, so now you're going to be spending most of those 1,500 words looking at one problem rather than 3 problems. So one problem you're going to have to explore in greater depth. And by exploring it more fully, you're going to persuade an audience. You have that opportunity to persuade an audience. But you have to be very careful in the problem that you pick, because it has to be supportive and illustrated. The best illustration you can think of to support this opinion that you're offering on the topic of romantic desire. You could also go with 2 problems. You could focus on 2 problems. In this case, again, 1,500 words, 2 problems. You can see you'll be exploring each problem more in depth than if you were to explore 3 problems. But if you choose 2 problems, I would recommend that you find 2 problems that are very closely linked with each other. 2 problems that, one, for example, might be a consequence of the first problem. So you find one problem that the lovers confront, and that problem has a consequence, right? Has an effect, perhaps an even greater problem that leads to. So if you choose 2 problems to focus on, Again, you'll be exploring those two in more depth. And here you want to find two problems that you find there's some sort of bond. So there's something that's bonding them together, something that's tying them together. They're very closely associated, these two problems, with each other. So one, two, or three reasons, one, two, or three problems. And what I'll be doing as I go throughout the play is pointing out various problems that the lovers face, the obstacles in their way of the happy ending. And you're welcome to use any of the problems that I raise, or you're welcome to, discern problems in the play for yourself and use those. Or a combination thereof, that's fine as well. But finally, it isn't enough, is it, just to state the problem that the lover, that let's say a particular couple is up against in the play. That's not enough just to tell us what the problem is, because you're from the show me state. You're from Missouri, the show me state, and so you've got to show us. You can't just tell us what the problem is. That's not giving us enough detail. You've got to become a kind of scientist. You've got to go to the text like a scientist goes out into the world, and you've got to find specific examples, illustrations of that problem in the text. You've got to find that evidence, that you've got to make those scientific observations in the text, see what you find, and that's what you're going to have to do when you say, here's one problem that the lovers confront, then show us evidence from the text. Become the scientist, explore the text, find that evidence. Find evidence to support that problem, that first reason that you're presenting to us. And then, of course, you've got to become the philosopher. You've got to show us the evidence, find it in the text, and then explain to us how that evidence logically, like the philosopher, remember the philosopher takes the scientific evidence, and that evidence adds up logically to a most important truth. So you've got to cite a passage, find a place in the play, evidence in the play like a scientist, and that's not enough. You can't just say, here's evidence in the play, and you can't just paraphrase. You can't just put in your own words what the play is stating, because you've got to make a logical connection like a philosopher's. The philosopher takes the scientific evidence, adds it up, and sees what it equals. So you've got to show that evidence in that scientific evidence, you've got to show how that adds up, how it logically goes back and supports this idea you're exploring, that love in a Midsummer Night's Dream is being presented as having this really frightening aspect of love is being shown. It's as we said, this realistic and tragic plot line, this tragic view, this tragic plot, and this realistic view is being shown in the play when it comes to love. So you've got to make that connection between what you cite and how that is linking back logically to your thesis statement. So keep that in mind. So if you think about four little questions, I've thought about, this always helps. It helps me, when I'm writing essays, it helps me keep in mind that I've got to answer these four questions. First, I've got to think, what am I writing about Brussels sprout? I've got to have the topic clear in my head what I'm writing about. What are you writing about Brussels sprout? And second, I've got to think, well, what do I think, tiddlywink, about what I'm writing about? What do I think, tiddlywink? What's my opinion? And that topic plus my opinion on the topic gives me my thesis, and I need to state that clearly in one sentence. And then after that, I need to think, well, it's not enough just to state my opinion. I'm not entitled to have anyone respect my opinion unless I can support it. So I've got to ask a third question. Tell me why. Why do I have this opinion? Tell me why pudding pie. Tell me why pudding pie. Why do you have this opinion? I've got to go to the text and find 1, 2, or 3 illustrations, 3 problems that the lovers in the play are confronting to tell us why. But still, that's not enough. I have to answer a 4th question because I've got to think like a scientist and like a philosopher. I've got to explain, I'm from the show me state, explain what I mean, jelly bean. I've got to show how these problems, the evidence, I've got to find the evidence, and I've got to show logically, rationally, how this evidence is supporting my opinion. So keep those 4 questions in mind. I don't think there are any other English teachers on campus. I could be wrong here, but I don't think any of them know these 4 questions. So keep that in mind, and you'll always remember when you sit down to write an essay, you'll know how to proceed. First, what are you writing about, Brussels sprout? And second, what do you think, tiddlywink? And third, tell me why, pudding pie. And fourth, what do you mean, jelly bean? And you'll have your essay once you answer those questions. All right, let's take a break. I shall return. And here I am again. Let's continue. Let's actually turn to the play, finally, and we'll turn to Act 1. I'm on page 1339 in your anthology. And this is Act 1, Scene 1. And we'll let's start at the beginning. That's a good place to start, as Glenda the Good Witch says. The best place to begin is at the beginning. And of course, we don't have our broomsticks with us, so we'll have to just walk down this yellow brick road together and see how we fare. I guess that means you're Dorothy. And I suppose I guess I'm a combination of the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion. So yeah, I'm the teacher here. I'm a kind of guide. Maybe I'm helping you here. Again, I always think about when you first learn to ride a bike. The training wheels are on first, but the training wheels are coming off now. But don't fret, because I'm right by you here, okay? And then you might be wobbling a little bit, but I'm going to stay by you until you can ride that bicycle on your own. So I'm going to, as we go through the play, as I said, I'm going to point out several of the problems. I'll try to find as many as I can in the time that we have. I hope to get at least half a dozen, maybe a few more. And you get to choose 1, 2, or 3. I wouldn't go over 3. Once you remember, it's a 1,500 word essay, and once you go over 3, you're not writing a book. Essays are relatively, generally speaking, relatively short. I'm not asking you to write a book. So let's stick with 3. You can go over 1,500 words, obviously, but remember, essays they focus on one topic and one opinion on that topic. So generally speaking, they are short. And let's stick with 1, 2, or 3. But I'll introduce some of these problems. I'll touch on them in the opening act here. But and I'm going to let you know up front that these problems repeat. Many of them repeat throughout the play. And it'll be your job. I mean, now and then I might say, oh, look, here's that problem we saw in Act 1. Here it is repeating again. But I want you to keep that in mind as you're working on your journals, that when you find a problem that the lovers are confronted with, that there's a fairly good chance that you're going to see that problem showing up some other place in the play. And that just provides additional evidence for you to latch onto, to zero in on, and to analyze. So keep that in mind. I remember when I was little and my cousin told me a joke, and it was about 2 birds on a branch. And we can imagine 2 cardinals on a branch, since we're from Missouri. So there are 2 birds on a branch, he'd say. And one's name is Pete, and the other's name is Repeat. Now, Pete flew away, so who was left? And I'd say, Repeat. And she'd say, there are 2 birds on a branch, one named Pete, and the other's name's Repeat. Now, Pete flew away, who's left? And I'd say, Repeat. So you get the idea. There are 2 birds on the branch here, and I'm going to point out Pete. And Pete's going to fly away. But you keep in mind, there's still a bird on that branch called repeat. So you can find that evidence, that problem that we're zeroing in on. Chances are you're going to see it repeat in the play. More than once. Probably. More than likely. So let's turn to Act 1, Scene 1. And Theseus has the opening lines of the play, and he turns to Hippolyta and he says, "Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws on apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. She lingers my desires, like to a stepdame or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue." So I've quoted a passage from the play, Theseus's opening words here. And there's one word in this passage that's particularly interesting. It's the first word that I noticed that stands out to me, and that's the word desires. Desires. And Shakespeare introduces this concept of desires in the opening lines of the play. And I would argue he does so because it's an all-important concept in Shakespeare's mind. And to understand this concept fully, I think we have to back up just a little bit and talk about the basic problems of coming into the world, the basic problems of existing in the world. And this is a concept on your exam, by the way. So what does desire mean? It basically, if you desire something, think about it. If you desire X, that means you don't have X. You want X. You may need X really badly. You gotta have it. So you're in this state of lack, of need, of want. And it ain't a pretty state, is it? It's a frustrating state because you don't have what you need, what you desire. And that's not a good thing. So this idea of desire means you want something, you need something that you don't have. And since you don't have it and you want it, you're in a state of dissatisfaction. You're in a state of unease, baby. You need it, you want it, you're in pain. Depending on just what that thing is, you could be in great pain. So that, I would argue, is gives us this idea of the basic problem of coming into the world. Look, if you don't exist, if you never come into the world, you don't have any desires. Because you don't exist. You don't have any needs, any wants. You don't lack anything. But the moment that you come into the world, the moment that you exist is the moment that you find you're going to be in need of something. You're going to have the need to feed. I always remember the plant in The Little Shop of Horrors. Feed me, Seymour. You're going to have, like that plant, like the monstrous plant. That's probably a good analogy to think of. Remember the plant in The Little Shop of Horrors. It begins as a little baby. Feed me, Seymour. But then it's not enough. Seymour has to keep feeding him, and the plant gets larger and larger until it's just an enormous, gigantic, humongous size. Feed me, Seymour. And it keeps wanting to be fed. So this idea of being in this state of dissatisfaction, that's what happens when you come into the world. You have this need to feed. You have to consume. Why is that? Well, I mean, that's what evolution has done to us. That's how we evolved. And remember, when I say evolution did it, evolution is not conscious. It's not intelligent. It's just a process. This is what happened. Because of this cause and effect law operating in the universe, this is what happened. You came into the world with this brain. And what is this brain? Let's analyze the brain. Let's break the brain apart into its various constituents, its various elements, right? And let's find out, what is the brain? What's its function? What's its purpose? We're analyzing again, aren't we? Well, if we analyze the brain, we look at it closely, we look at the billions of neurons that have these neuron is just a special term for a nerve cell, right? It signals nerve impulses, communicates nerve impulses. So you have this central nervous system hooked to this brain, and the brain has these billions of neurons, and then there are trillions of synapses between the neurons, and you have the chemicals, right, flooding through the brain, and you have the electrical energy. You have the energy bits interacting with the matter bits in the brain, so you have these electrical impulses as well. And all of this, what's it all for? The brain is an evolutionary tool. Why does it exist? It exists, as I said earlier in the introductory lecture, it exists to detect problems, to let you know, you the organism, to let you know that you're in pain. You're in pain. You better do something about it. You've got to do something about it if you wish to escape the pain, if you wish to avoid the pain. So the brain in pain, that's a problem. And that's what happens when you come into the world. Your brain is this tool, this mechanical device that's detecting problems in the world, like Agatha Christie's famous detective Hercule Poirot, or her other famous detective, Miss Marple. Your brain is a detective, and what it's doing, it's saying, you've got a problem. You've got pain. You've got dissatisfaction. You've got to fix that problem. You're broken. You've got to fix it. You're broken. You've got to fix that break. It always reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the Christmas special that comes on every year, the little animated special. In that story, there's the island of broken toys, where all the unwanted toys go when the children tire of them or when the toys break. They don't just get tossed in the garbage, they get tossed on the island of broken toys and they're forgotten. Well, you're broken when you come into the world, because you come into the world in this state of need. You're in pain and you got to feed, you got to consume. Feed me, Seymour. I thought of another metaphor too. I think I may have heard this metaphor somewhere. I can't recall. But it's as if you're born in quicksand. You're born in quicksand and you find yourself sinking. You're born, quicksand, of course, represents the state of unease, of dissatisfaction, of want, of need, of desire. And you find yourself quickly sinking in the quicksand if you can't satisfy the need. So you could think of the broken toy or the quicksand, or you could think of, the monstrous plant in The Little Shop of Horrors, Feed Me, Seymour. That's the first problem of coming into existence. But there are other problems, but we'll get to those. But first I want to talk about the kinds of needs and the kinds of wants and the kinds of desires that you're faced with the moment that you become conscious and sentient and you're a feeling, right? You're a feeling robot, and suddenly you're aware that, something ain't right. I got to fix it. So I'll be back in just a moment. And here we are again, and let's talk about, again, on your midterm exam, this next concept. There are three categories of needs. We're going to categorize these particular needs. The first, of course, are your biological needs, right? As a biological organism, you have needs, and those needs have to be met. So you need the air to breathe. If you don't think you need the air to breathe, just hold your breath for a few minutes and see what happens. And you can see the moment, try that. I'll give you just a second. Hold your breath, and you'll notice that at first, look at me, I can hold my breath, but slowly, gradually, what's starting to happen? You can feel, this is uncomfortable, isn't it? Yeah, I'm experiencing quite a bit of discomfort now. This is getting worse. This is starting to hurt now. This is getting painful. So you can see, you got to have that air. Your organism needs it. It's a physiological, a biological need. You got to have water at least. something to drink, liquid, right? Otherwise, you're going to start to get thirsty. It's going to get worse. And you got to have food. You got to consume something. Your body needs energy. So your body needs water. Your body needs food. You got to have clothing. You got to protect yourself from the elements. Sometimes it's too cold. You need clothing. Sometimes it's too hot. But you still need some sort of clothing. All right? Protect yourself from the elements. Sometimes the rain comes. You need an umbrella. Sometimes the winds come. You need to protect yourself. So you need some sort of clothing. You need shelter, of course. Got to have a roof over your head. And you need something else, too. When you hit your teenage years, something happens, doesn't it? Those hormones kick in, and suddenly you realize, you got to have sex, too, don't you? Yeah, because you don't have sex, and you realize, that's frustrating. That can be really frustrating, that sexual frustration. That can be rather painful, can't it? So these needs that you have, you don't get these needs, you lose. If your biological organism doesn't get these needs, you lose. Sometimes you become in such great pain that you no longer, right? You walk right off the stage of existence if the pain becomes too great. So you lose. You don't win. So remember, that's what the brain is doing. It's detecting these needs that the organism has to fulfill in order to not lose, in order to be in the game, in order to win. And then, of course, we have psychological needs, don't we? Think about that. You realize that you're not the only human being on the planet. You look around, there are other people all around you, and these other people have needs too. And then you realize, the resources out there are rather limited, so you have to start competing. You have to start competing for those resources, for those needs. You've got to go out and grab what you can get, and everybody's trying to grab what you want. And so there's this competitive side to us. And ultimately we develop what Sigmund Freud calls the ego, right? This psychological need to see ourselves as winners. We don't want to be losers. I remember in high school, people would walk down the halls, and when they'd see me coming, they'd do this. They'd put an L on their forehead to say, there comes the loser. So, you don't want to be the loser with the L, right? Branded on your forehead. You don't want to be the loser. You want to be perceived as one of the alphas. You don't want to be one of the betas. You want to be an alpha, a winner. You want to be the king of the hill. All right, in this competitive game, in this gladiator war, if you will. Yeah, you want to be standing at the end of the war. So you want to see yourself as a winner. This ego of yours, you want to feel special. You want to feel unique, don't you? Like you matter. You're important. I'm important, you say. And you want this idea, you want to feel important. It gives you comfort. It gives you security. It makes you feel good about yourself to be the winner. And so you alleviate that idea, I'm not a loser after all, am I? No, I feel good about myself. I'm self-confident, right? I have self-esteem, high self-esteem. I'm not a loser. Because to be in this state where you say, oh God, I'm a loser. Look, I never get to the top of the king of the hill. I'm never king of the hill. Somebody always beats me to the top. Oh, I'm just not special. I'm not important. I don't have any comfort or security. Nobody cares. No, and then you feel like a loser. So that's a painful state. That's a frustrating state, isn't it? That hurts. You don't want to feel as if you don't belong, as if you're not special in some way. So we have these psychological needs too that drive us. And we have to see ourselves as coming out on top, perceive ourselves as winners. And then finally we have cultural needs, don't we? I mean, you're not born in a vacuum. You're born into a particular culture. And all these other humans that came before you, they're already in the game. They're already playing the game, and they've determined the game for you. What makes them feel important, and many people buy into, right, the rules of the game, without even thinking. Right, they kind of just follow with the herd. What makes them feel important is what the culture says is important. What other people around you say is important. So you can have all kinds of cultural needs, can't you? I mean, you might have the need to feel pretty because your culture says you're a winner if you're pretty. Right? If you're not pretty, you're a loser. Yeah? So you buy into what the culture tells you. There's $1 billion beauty industry, and it's aimed mainly to women. Right? Women have to be pretty. That's what the culture says. And many women are owned by that idea, by that cultural. They become addicted to what the culture says is important. This cultural addiction. And so, or if you're a guy, you think, oh well, you don't want to be a weakling, right? You got to be big, strong, tough. You got to have big biceps, baby, right? That's important, so you can stretch your stuff. Right? And the culture tells you, yeah, muscles, that's attractive. You got to be handsome. You got to be attractive. Huh? The muscles will get you. That'll make you attractive. Look at all the gyms across the country in our particular culture here. The gyms that open up and all these young men in the gym pumping iron. Right? They bought into that idea that this is what's important, to have my bulging biceps. See that? Look how handsome I am. Look how attractive I am. Yeah, people buy into these ideas, don't they? You got to be famous. The culture says you're a winner if you're famous. You're famous. Wow, that makes you a winner. You got to be a great singer. Become a great singer. You'll be famous and popular, and that's important. So a lot of people get addicted. They need that, right? You turn on, you see American Idol, and you see The Voice, and everybody watching that, and everybody, ooh, look at the herd of people. All the sheep are following that, saying, yeah, that's what's important, be a great singer. Or you've got to be a great dancer. America's Greatest Dancers, right? I think is that the name of the show? I'm not sure. So yeah, you got to be a great skateboarder. Look at how many young men become addicted, and I guess young women too, become addicted to skateboarding. They got to be the best. That's what makes them the winner. They're not the loser with the L on their forehead. The culture tells them that, yeah, skateboarding, particularly that culture, the other guys in that culture, the skateboarding culture. Or you got to be a great athlete. Particularly, this particular value is. A lot of young men are affected by this value. It says, yeah, you want to be somebody special and important. Here's what the culture tells you. You got to be a great athlete. You got to be able to hit a home run. You got to be able to make a touchdown. You got to be able to, I don't know, whatever it might be. But yeah, you got to be a great athlete. That's what's important. That's what you need. And if you're not that, well, then you're a loser. And that can make you feel bad. So, or it could be money. The culture says, yeah, you need to be a millionaire. You need to be a billionaire. And that'll make you feel important. You can build skyscrapers to yourself, and at the top you can write Trump. And that'll make you feel important and special. And you won't be a loser anymore. So whatever it might be, you need to be a great teacher. Oh dear, I think I might have bought into that addiction, yeah. A great teacher. Right? That'll make you feel good about yourself. And the culture says, yeah, well, I don't know how much importance the culture places on great teachers, but at any rate. So you get the idea. All of these needs, if they aren't met, these biological needs, these psychological needs, these cultural needs, remember the needs that the culture tells you. They say this is what's important. And very quickly you get addicted and you start believing that's what's important. That's what I need. That's what I have to have. So all of these various kinds of needs, you find yourself, once you become conscious and sentient, once you're in the world, once you exist, you find yourself with all of these needs. You find yourself the broken toy that needs to be fixed. You find yourself in the quicksand, sinking ever. If you're not getting your needs met, you're going down, you're going under. Right? So that's the first problem, right? This problem of existence is that you're born into this state of dissatisfaction. And the second problem is that these needs that you find yourself with, they are relentless. They are constant. They never go away. You will have them for the rest of your life. I remember when I was little, I was given a game. It was called the game of pegs, and it was a little board with holes in it, and you took a hammer and you hit one peg down. And when you hit one peg down, another peg popped up on the board. So you go over and you hit that second peg. When you did that, a third peg would pop up. And you go hit that third peg, and when you did that, the first peg would pop up. Now that's what's happening, right? You meet a need, and what happens? Another need takes its place. You meet that need, what happens? A third need takes its place. Well, you meet the third need, and what happens at that point? By then, that first need has come back, you need it again. Look, I met my need for hunger at breakfast, but here it is again at lunch. Here it is again at dinner. Now I need my midnight snack. And I've got all these other needs in between that keep popping up. So the second problem with coming into existence, the fundamental basic problem, not only are you born with these needs, but these needs are constant. They're relentless. They're going to follow you till the end of your days. You're going to have these needs. And it's really interesting too. I made a little note here too, just to remind you that you can meet a need, and then suddenly you can realize that you need something better. So you could maybe you've bought into this idea that to be a winner you need a fancy sports car. Right? You need a Corvette, and that makes you a winner. Look at me. The culture has taught you that this makes you a winner if you drive the fancy sports car. And so you get your Corvette, but then you realize, hey, that satisfies you for a little bit, but then now you want a Lamborghini. That's the problem, isn't it? Is these needs that you have that are part and parcel of existence, that they're relentless and they just never quite satisfied, right? Just never quite enough. I mean, if you're sexually frustrated, you have that one orgasm, and 10 minutes later, you're ready for another. So it's just never quite enough, is it? These needs. So maybe we ought to take a break on that last illustration. I don't know where that illustration came from. So let's take a break, and I shall return.